del chaleco. Y tú que no sos violento, mamita, que me traigan suéter. No, eso solo es para ver el crecimiento de Pablito. Ay, ya se recibió, felicidades, mamá. Gracias, gracias, Mayri. Lindo la charla. Pero las flores, ahí le voy a pedir su favorcito que me las entre. Pero hay que ver dónde te ponen, ahí te digo. Sí, mi mamá le va a decir. Estoy aquí con sonidos.
Diaspora as used to be migrants, now part and parcel of the identity of
Well, I think we can start. So good afternoon or good morning to everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me well? Yeah. So I'm very pleased to be with you on behalf of our colleague of TBNet, OSGI, ISHR, and Amnesty International to have this first briefing on the outcome of the 2020 review process. The objective is to make sure that we can share the information we have in Geneva regarding the latest development of this review process, and to be able to share with you also the outcome of the report made by the co-facilitator Switzerland and Morocco, and also to have a possibility to discuss the next steps, the current situation also regarding the COVID, and also how the national NGOs and civil society can actually better engage with the treaty bodies in this difficult time. So the objective of those two meetings is really meant to be informal. Two meetings, I mean the meeting of today, and we will have a similar meeting tomorrow that will be also conducted in French and in English. So those two meetings, today and tomorrow, again, the objective is really to be able to discuss with you, to update you on the latest development of the treaty bodies in general, and the COFAX reports and the 2020 review. I hope we will have fruitful discussions. The objective is also to be quite informal, so we are quite big group, but I think there is really hope to have a discussion, so feel free to use the chat and also to raise your hand if you would like to have questions after the different presentations. Thank you very much also my different colleagues who will give presentations. We were also supposed to have the update from the COFAX report rapporteur from Switzerland, but Samira cannot be with us today. But we are very lucky to have our colleagues Christoph Spendley, who is also here, and he will be able to respond to questions while I will give the short presentation of the report itself. With this, I would like to give the floor to Christian, my colleague from OSGI. Thank you very much, Christian, first to support our work and the work of TBNet to be able to organize this meeting. And thank you also for being part of the meeting. So I'm very pleased to give you the floor for some introductory remarks, and the floor is yours in New York. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patrick, and good morning and good afternoon to many of you. Pleasure to see some faces that I known for some time, and a few that I remember from our meeting last year. And strange and sad to see you all in little boxes on my screen, but that's sort of been the way 2020 has been going. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Christian De Vos. I'm an advocacy officer with the Open Society Justice Initiative. And I just really wanted to echo Patrick's comments and welcome everyone on behalf of the Justice Initiative, TBNet, ISHR, Amnesty, for joining today's discussion. I recognize this has been an exceptionally difficult year for everyone. So grateful to you all for your time and continued commitment to strengthening UN treaty body system. And I do hope you and your families are keeping as healthy and safe as possible. I also wanted to just thank CCPR for all their hard work in bringing this conversation together, complete with translations and 2 sessions, no less, across multiple time zones. So thanks to Patrick and Andrea and the CCPR team for bringing us together. And I know some familiar faces I see who are part of the NGO workshop that we held last July, 2019. That truly feels like a lifetime ago. This process was, a lot had happened, but the formal governmental review had yet to kick off. We held that meeting because we thought it was a good opportunity to try and develop a joint position among civil society, to discuss and brainstorm proposals, to try to align, do what we could to help align the various stakeholders. I think looking back, we did a pretty good job of that, even if it led to some spirited debate amongst all of us. But I do think the position papers that were produced as a result of that helped set the tone and had an impact on the discussions that have unfolded over this past year. And I think, as we face what is being called a follow-up to the co-facilitators report, and as we also think about the continued resourcing and funding challenges that the system faces, we hope that this discussion was a good opportunity to not only review and take stock of the report and all the work since last July, but also to begin to think about next steps. Grateful to you all for your continued engagement throughout the process, and to the co-facilitators who produced the report. I look forward to the discussion about that. In my view, it seems that the report has taken up some of the proposals and recommendations that civil society have put forward. And I was happy to see no return to some of the more regressive proposals that we had to push back against the last time in 2013. But I think we still need to see how all these proposals are actually going to fit within the 68-268 framework. And of course, COVID-19 is presenting yet new challenges and unprecedented pressure on the system. So I think it's a reminder that treaty body strengthening is always an ongoing project. And as we look back, we're also going to be talking about next steps and looking ahead. Patrick already sort of walked us through the agenda, but just to say, I'm going to close up here, and then I believe our colleague Lucy from TVNet is going to offer some of the recap and review of the process for those of you who understandably aren't following all the ins and outs of this, just to help everyone understand the past year or so, and then bring us up to essentially the release of the co-facilitators report in September this year. And then, as Patrick said, grateful to Christoph from the Swiss mission, who is available to answer questions. So we'll walk through the report in a bit of detail, and then additional colleagues from ISHR who will turn to next steps for 2020, 2021, both looking at the resourcing and funding issues that continue to face the system, but also to look at the UN treaty body response to COVID-19 and how we can what we can expect in terms of the way the treaty bodies are going to be organizing themselves in the coming months. Yeah, hopefully at the end of this, we can both all feel more educated about where we currently stand, but also have identified next steps for advocacy that's going to be coming. So I'll close there and thank everyone again for joining. I would be remiss in not acknowledging that we're on the eve of a very momentous election here in the United States tomorrow. So I'm actually heading to Pennsylvania after this call. I would appreciate all good wishes to those of us, well, here in the US, but also around the world. Fingers crossed that we can also see some strengthening and reform in the United States very soon. But thank you again, Patrick, and I'll close there. And I think Lucy's gonna take it over.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I really understand that you have actually domestic priorities in the US, and I think it will be a tough week for you. And we wish you all the best in the US. Lucy, thank you also very much for doing the presentation. Before that, I just would like also to thank Vincent Ploton. Vincent is kindly agreed to jump in the presentation to replace Andrea Meraz, my colleague who is sick today. So he will also introduce the item on the COVID-19 and how the consequence of this crisis, health crisis in the work of the UNTRIBUD. So thank you also, Vincent, for that. I really appreciate it because it was kind of last minute request and you kindly agreed to do so. So Lucy, the floor is yours, and thank you also very much for the time you spent to prepare this presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. Can everyone hear me? Working? Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone, and yeah, good luck to the US. I had momentarily forgotten, but I presume all our US colleagues had not, that was happening. So yes, fingers crossed. So my name is Lucy McKernan. I work for the Global Initiative for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and I'm based here in Geneva, and we're part of TBNet, and I follow in particular the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And I was going to give a brief overview of the process that we're talking about here, particularly since July 2019, so last year. So, so the so-called treaty body strengthening process has been a long and tortuous history, I would say. The current iteration of the process goes back really to 2014 with the adoption of the now infamous resolution 68-268, and you will have heard us talk a lot about that. That resolution, in fact, was the outcome of the previous process concerning the strengthening of the treaty bodies, which involved many reports, many reform proposals, and negotiations in a very highly politicized intergovernmental process. And the resolution 68-268, which was entitled Strengthening and Enhancing the Effective Functioning of the Human Rights Treaty Body System, which gives you an idea as to its content, set out a list of recommendations and suggestions for strengthening the treaty bodies. I won't go into them, but just broadly things like aligning the methodologies of the treaty bodies in relation to their various functions, elections and membership of treaty body members. There were provisions about reinforcing the independence of the treaty bodies and their members. There was the establishment of a dedicated capacity building and technical assistance program for states to assist them with their reporting, and importantly, a formula for the allocation of meeting time and resources for the treaty bodies to carry out their work. And that resolution concluded with the last provision saying that the General Assembly would then consider the state of the human rights treaty body system no later than 6 years from the date of the resolution to review the effectiveness of the measures and so on. And so everyone understood this to mean that there would be a further review or consideration of the treaty body system in 6 years' time, that is in 2020. And so the idea was that between 2014 and 2020, the treaty bodies and OHCHR would take action to implement the various recommendations in the resolution, but it was never very clear as to when this review would happen and what it would look like. And it's probably fair to say that in the first few years, not a lot happened, but then there was a lot of movement on a number of the different recommendations in the resolution by the treaty bodies themselves and by OHCHR. And by about 2019, all stakeholders were starting to ask, what will this review be? What will it look like? And I think people were very keen to avoid the long and difficult negotiations that they'd seen in the previous strengthening process. And so this was when last year, when civil society came together, because we wanted to ensure that civil society's perspective was included in this review to happen, given how important civil society is, both as supporters of the system, but also as users of the system. And there were a number of different civil society initiatives that happened. Many groups got together. We had a consultation, as Christian mentioned, in July 2019 to discuss ideas, reform proposals and so on, and to try to put forward concrete proposals, but jointly together as a civil society group. Clarity about when this review would happen and what it might look like. And we didn't find that out until April this year, when the President of the General Assembly, the Ambassador of Nigeria, appointed the Ambassador of Morocco and the Ambassador of Switzerland as co-facilitators to lead an intergovernmental process on the consideration of the state of the Human Rights Treaty Body System in accordance with the Resolution 68268. And I have a small slide. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's hope this works. Where is it? No. Okay, I can't find
Hello,
it right.
Lucy. So this is Gina Milic. I am from International Disability Alliance.
Yes.
I am doing the technical support. So you are not going to be able to share your screen unless
okay.
you send me an email with this, and then I can share it for you.
Okay. Oh, well, let's not worry. I think it's not super important.
Thank you very much.
I think it's fine. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'll take you through it, the timeline that we had prepared. In any event, it was in April that the General Assembly appointed the co-facilitators, Switzerland and Morocco, and set out essentially a proposed process. He asked the co-facilitators to undertake informal consultations with member states, both in New York and in Geneva. He also talked about contributions from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, from the treaty bodies, and from all relevant stakeholders. And he requested that the co-facilitators submit a report at the end of that process for the 74th session of the General Assembly in September this year, outlining recommendations and so on. So Switzerland and Morocco began their mandate in about, I suppose, June last year. They confirmed that there would be a process of written submissions, then some capacity building for diplomats who were kind of new to the issue about the treaty bodies, and consultations that would be open to all stakeholders, and finally the report to the President of the General Assembly in September. So just to go through very broadly those two sets of consultations. First of all, the written submissions, which the call was made in June and submissions were due in July, so it was quite a short time frame, but there was still strong engagement, which we were really pleased with. 90 submissions from all regions of the world, 55 submissions from states, including 2 from groups, so the African group and the European Union, 35 submissions from other relevant stakeholders, 22 of those was from civil society, including 4 joint submissions, including the one that we TBNet and others were involved in, which had a very high number of civil society sponsors, 6 from national human rights institutions, and 7 from current and former treaty body members. So then there was the consultation process with all stakeholders that began in June with a launch meeting that Switzerland held, setting out its vision for this process, and really importantly, I think, highlighting that they wanted the process to be guided by the principles of inclusivity and transparency, and that all the meetings would be webcast. The launch was followed, as I said, by an online technical expert level briefing on the treaty body system. This was to make sure that colleagues particularly from states who were not familiar with the treaty bodies or with the process could get up to speed very quickly to understand it. Then there were consultations online for member states in New York, a meeting with the chairpersons of the treaty bodies, which was also online, but it was a closed meeting. There was an informal consultation with member states in Geneva, and that was partly in person and partly online. And a meeting with the High Commissioner for Human Rights and her team here in Geneva, which was a closed meeting. And then finally, a meeting with all other stakeholders, meaning civil society, academia, national human rights institutions, and so on. That was in Geneva, also partly in person and partly online. So, and in that final meeting, I think it's worth noting there were 48 participants. So it was relatively well participated in. And to conclude the process, of course, we had the co-facilitators report, which was published in September, and Switzerland and Morocco then held a wrap-up meeting in relation to that report. And I won't mention the details of that report because other colleagues are going to address it. I just thought it might be useful to share a couple of reflections about the submission process and the submissions themselves. The first thing I would say is that, you know, as I mentioned before, Switzerland and Morocco had committed to this inclusive and transparent process. And I think it's fair to say that the view of civil society, or at least those that we have discussed with and who participated, was that that was achieved, that the consultations with states were all webcast, the information about the process was publicly available, and there were opportunities for civil society to contribute their views, either via the written submissions or the consultation meetings. The other thing is that we found that was useful was that NGOs outside of Geneva were able to participate virtually in the consultation process. And perhaps this is something we can thank, you know, COVID-19 for, bringing some of these, having greater visibility and accessibility for some of these consultation processes now that we're doing a lot of meetings online. So that was useful. So I think overall we would say that it was a strong process despite the very short time period. And then I just thought I'd share some reflections, and they're not just my reflections, these are reflections from other civil society organisations who have discussed the process subsequently, and reflections about the submissions and what they contained. The first thing I should say is the co-facilitators report itself does a really good job of synthesizing the various views expressed in the consultations and the written submissions. And so I would recommend, if you're interested in the detail, in having a look at that. And I think it presents them in a balanced way. So sort of giving appropriate weight where there was more support for particular initiatives than there was for others. Broadly, some of the points that were raised in the submissions, there was quite a lot of support for the fixed, predictable calendar and reporting cycle. You know, and this is something that we discussed as civil society groups back in July last year, and that was included in some of the civil society submissions to the process. There was also some support from both states and civil society for state reviews to be held in the regions. However, the notion of reviewing a state in the absence of a report was controversial. There was some support for that, but also some states who didn't like that idea. There was the alignment of working methods was another topic that received a lot of attention. It was generally very well supported. There was also support for the notion of the simplified reporting procedure being extended more broadly to all states. As you might expect, the budgetary situation of the Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights received a lot of attention, given the backdrop of the severe budgetary shortfall and the impacts that has had on the work of the treaty bodies and on the work of the Human Rights Council. There was also quite a lot of support for adequate funding for the work of the petitions unit in particular, and a number of calls for a digital case management system. The topic of the increased use of technology was also a common theme, and you might imagine that this was the case particularly because of the current context with the COVID pandemic. Although states were more focused on this as a means of improving the efficiency of the treaty body's work and the cost of meetings, whereas civil society seemed to emphasize more the benefits of accessibility of online meetings and so on. Some states encouraged the treaty bodies to do more online work. Some didn't like this idea at all. The topic of membership and elections was also well covered. There were many who called for greater gender and geographical diversity in the membership of the treaty bodies. Some recommended term limits for members. There was a strong push by some states, a small number of states, but it was a strong push for a code of conduct for treaty body members. But the majority of submissions did not support this. And there were other suggestions for making the election processes more transparent. There are also some hostile submissions in relation to the treaty bodies overstepping their mandate or not being objective in their work. Others also said that the treaty bodies do not have a mandate to develop general comments or to do follow-up work. But of course, we recall this was an issue that has come up many times in the past, including in the previous treaty body strengthening process. So it's not new, and it's generally a minority of states who put this view. Finally, I just mentioned interpretation of meetings and translation of documents into all 6 UN languages was emphasised by some states, but conveniently ignoring the obvious budgetary implications for requiring this to happen, and at the same time blocking resources for the treaty bodies to in fact be able to implement this recommendation. There were a number of states, unfortunately, who wanted to limit the participation of civil society in the work of the treaty bodies, or to censor civil society submissions, or to give less weight to them than to state party reports. But of course, there was also a very strong or a high number of states who insisted on the important role of civil society in the treaty body's work and on protecting civil society against reprisals in relation to their engagement with the treaty bodies. Finally, on accessibility for all stakeholders, this was a topic that came up also quite a lot, including particularly accessibility for persons with disabilities. And the webcast was also supported by a number of states and by civil society as having been an important innovation for increasing the visibility and accessibility of the treaty body's work. So to conclude, I would say overall we were not, I think civil society were not surprised by any new issues that arose in the submissions, and were generally pleased by the support for the fixed reporting calendar and by overall a relatively supportive environment for the treaty bodies, which perhaps we hadn't anticipated. However, I would still note that there still seems to be a different vibe coming from states or diplomats working in New York as opposed to Geneva, and we've seen this in the past as well. It's something we might want to discuss further. The other thing I would emphasise, and I would agree with what Christian had said already on this, that the civil society submissions and participation in the process was really very important for ensuring a balanced outcome report. So really in pushing for a number of issues and balancing the views of some of the states who perhaps were more hostile to the work of the treaty bodies. So I'll wrap up there. I think that's probably enough, and let others talk about what happened in terms of the outcome. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Leslie, for this feedback on the process and the various contributions. And as you said, I think there is some constructive reports and submission from either states or civil society. I think the atmosphere, I would say, is a bit different than what we had in the past in terms of the engagement of the various stakeholders and in a way to move forward with more constructive approach than what we could have in the past. And those who followed this process since many years already saw so many attempts to really diminish the impact of the treaty bodies. And on that specific process now that we are facing on, I think that the situation is a bit more different, and there are some good hope to be more optimistic. And I would say the same with the COFAX report. And I speak under the control of my colleagues, but at least from my own perspective, I have the impression that the report is very comprehensive one with a lot of constructive recommendations, and actually the reports pave the way for new developments, and I think that's very encouraging. I will now go to the various recommendations, and again, as I said before, Christoph Spenle, who is also online with us from the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will be pleased to respond to questions on the process or on the report itself, and also on the next steps that we may see in the future from the state's perspective. So I share with you, and you had already in the past, but I shared it again on the chat the link with the report itself, and you will also see a brief presentation on the PowerPoint. It's a PDF of a PowerPoint that I did just to for you to follow and to see what are the main recommendations. The report itself is really structured in the different key issue or themes, and for each of them there are actually some recommendations, and the presentation that now is shared just take into consideration some summaries or outlining the main recommendations. Basically, to start with the beginning of the report, I would say that there is a clear assessment from the authors of the report, so Switzerland and Morocco, to say that the General Resolution 68 still provides an appropriate framework for the UN treaty bodies, and actually there will be now I'm just losing my document because it's on the share screen. Sorry, if you give me 2 seconds here. So there will be, I mean, if the resolution is fully implemented, there will be a possibility to really see the treaty bodies functioning properly. The problem is and we will see that later, the problem is the lack of fundings, and of course the lack of contribution from the state parties do not really allow to properly work on the treaty bodies. The first chapter, and Lucy also mentioned that from the different stakeholders, is the use of the information and communication technologies. I think this is very, very important in the sense of in the context of the current pandemic COVID-19. There is a clear position from the authors of the report to improve the engagement and the interaction online, and to move to a digital landscape in the process of the work of the UN treaty bodies. This, however, has some limits, and the report is very clear on that. Limits regarding the confidentiality, the stakeholders' safety online, and including the human rights defenders that may engage with the treaty bodies, and also a very practical one, which is the time zone, and we'll discuss that more on the later part of the agenda. Of course, if you have online meetings, you have very much difficulties regarding the time zone management, with some working on very early in the day and some very late in the evening. So that's one of the key challenge. But there is a consensus that the digital shift is really important, and the treaty bodies should move on this online approach. Although it's also very clear that this online approach cannot replace the in-person interaction, and that's crucial for the work of the treaty bodies. So there is a clear also a limit in what we can expect from the online perspective. So the recommendation, and I think that's on the presentation actually, the recommendation from the report is that the new technological developments should increase efficiency, transparency, and accessibility of the treaty body system. Online work should not replace interaction in person, and the co-facilitators also recommended to accelerating the digital shift, including considering online and hybrid models. And that's something we'll also discuss in the context of the 2021 work of the treaty bodies. Of course, there is a clear need in terms of budget for this digital shift, and that also should be taken into consideration by the state parties. Now, regarding this online tools and use of new technology, there is two specific focus. One is on individual communications, where there is also a need and strong advocating for the introduction of the case management system for the petition team, which will allow some online submission platform and more online tracking tool of the cases that are actually processed by the OHCHR and the petition team. And the report is also very clear on the fact that if you want to move to this online case management system, there is really a need in terms of financial support and human resource as well. And the second specific focus on the new technologies is dealing with the nomination of the selection of the treaty bodies members, where there is a clear recommendations to increase the web-based electoral platform to better know and evaluate the different candidates of the treaty bodies. So there is the authors of the report can really see an added value of the new tools to have more transparency in terms of the election process of the UN treaty bodies members. The second item which was discussed in this report is and that's very important in terms of the reporting procedure, is the alignment of the working methods and the rules of procedure of the treaty bodies. And here, as Lucy said, there is a vast majority of contributions that will come positive development of the alignment of the working methods and rules of procedures. But more need to be done, more alignment, more cooperation, and it is clear that for that, the reports acknowledge the central role of the chairs of the treaty bodies that could actually better develop this alignment of the working methods. So the role of the chairs is important, is crucial, and this was actually very much underlined in the report. Now they go more into details on specific issues regarding the working methods. One is the simplified reporting procedure. The fact that all the states can actually just adopt and receive a list of issues prior to the reporting procedure and respond to those questions in the list of issues, and that's actually is seen as a very positive steps, and the reports recommend that this should be more developed across all treaty bodies, but there is also a need to have a more systematic approach on this LYPR, list of issues prior to reporting, including the number of questions that should be limited, and clear standard methodology should be developed for all treaty bodies. Same regarding the dialogue with the states. The report still acknowledged there are different standards procedures on the constitutional dialogue, and those variations are sometimes confusing for states and stakeholders, including NGOs. So the report also urged the treaty bodies to have a more aligned approach regarding the dialogue with the states. And then there is also the issue of the concluding observations and how they're adopted by the treaty bodies and the related follow-up procedure. The reports acknowledge there is a need to improve the concluding observations. It's something we know since many years. They should be more focused, short, concrete, more targeted, and they should be also implementable in the sense of they should have a clear priority in the recommendations to know what are the most urgent one, and that's equal, of course, the follow-up procedure. It's also interesting to see that in this part of the report, the authors acknowledge the important role of the civil society and how the information received by the treaty bodies is crucial to perform the review and to have accurate and comprehensive recommendations in the context of the reporting procedure. They also suggest that the OHHR can play a leading role in the development of national mechanisms for reporting on follow-up at the national level. So the recommendations regarding the concluding observation is that they should, again, remain short, focused, concrete. There should be a good balance between the priority and the long-term priorities, and that should be clearly mentioned in the recommendations. Finally, the last part of this working methods and procedures for treaty bodies is the modalities for the stakeholders interaction, and I think that's very important for us as NGOs, as the report acknowledge there is a support and the acknowledgement of also of the efforts made by civil society to provide information to the treaty bodies, and they call for more alignment in the approach of how the treaty bodies engage with the CSO, the civil society, and the national human rights institutions. And they clearly also underline the need of respecting the San Jose guidelines regarding the reprisals and how human rights defenders may actually be a target of reprisals while engaging with the treaty bodies. So that's the one of the last point of the guidelines and the alignment of the working methods. Now there are three more points. One is and it's very much discussed during the various submissions of the stakeholders. This is the fixed calendar and how we can have more visibility in terms of the review cycles. There are, as Lucy said, there are development of new models, mainly developed by the governance committees, the Human Rights Committee and the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, where there is a long-term 8-year cycles that actually give more visibility and more predictability of the calendar. So globally, the report support this approach of this more clear and visible calendar that would facilitate the process and increase the engagement of the various stakeholders regarding the country reviews and all the different steps of these country reviews. There is another item which was also very much discussed and which is also really important, is the accessibility of different stakeholders. It's very important for us as civil society, as there is one chapter dealing with the civil society, national human rights institutions, and academic platforms. The report underlines, as I said before, the integral, and I quote, integral role of civil society, national human rights institutions, and academic platforms, and their role in engaging with the treaty bodies by providing information, creating awareness, and ensuring transparency and accountability of the process. But the report also insists on the fact that the CSOs and the other stakeholders play a critical role in the implementation at the national level, including for the follow-up of the recommendations. This accessibility is crucial and should be preserved and even more developed, keeping in line, as I said before, keeping in mind that the safety of the human rights defenders is crucial. So the report recommend to take specific measures to ensure the visibility, to enhance and to ensure the visibility of and the accessibility of the treaty body system, and to also develop more accessibility in terms of new technologies such as the webcast, the website that could be improved, and the online tools. There is a specific part of the report dealing with persons with disabilities to make sure that any digital shift that might be taken into consideration should make sure that the needs of people with disabilities should be completely covered. So there is a clear also request regarding this issue. And there is also an interesting part in that chapter on the reviews in regions, where there is some views on the need to develop work in regions, although there is not clear position of the report itself. But there is still an acknowledgement of the fact that there is a positive value to introduce reviews in regions. This could be either through the reviews at the UN Regional Office, or they also suggest some other concrete options, such as the follow-up webinars on concluding observations, or sharing good practice on the follow-up of the recommendations. Finally, one last point dealing with the capacity building on technical assistance. There it's a very short paragraph, but there is a clear acknowledgement of the role of the OHCHR in developing support to states to submit their report. And that's particularly true for some countries from the small islands and also from the least developed countries, where there should be support and further assisted to prepare their to prepare the reports for the country reviews, but also to be supported in terms of developing national mechanisms, such as the national mechanism for reporting on follow-up. The final part of the report is dealing with budgetary issues. There maybe two main points. One, there is a clear majority that consider that the funding of the treaty bodies the treaty bodies system should receive adequate fundings, and it's a key priority. And that's echo all the contributions received either from states or from the other stakeholders. And currently, those resources are insufficient. So the major challenge for the treaty bodies is now to get these adequate fundings. The report is also taken an interesting position on the famous formula that is part of the resolution 68 to 68. And the authors of the report, they agree that this formula is might be not adequate. They suggest to review this formula based not on the report received, but on the number of reports the treaty bodies plan to review based on the number of ratifications. So this is a proposal that is done in the report, but they also acknowledge that some of the states consider that such resource actually will not be increased, and all new development should be done within the extra should be done without any extra expenses. So in other words, to use a better management of the resource available. So that's the main content of the report. You see there are plenty of quite comprehensive recommendations that may actually lead to some positive steps. As I said before, it's my sense that we have a lot of food for thought to develop now new strategies and see how this could be carried out forward. There is really a good basis for positive developments, and it is hoped that now the next steps will really take into consideration those recommendations. And I think it would be very interesting, maybe first to discuss with you the content of this report, the content of the recommendations, and how, as civil society, we may want to move forward and convince states to really take into consideration those recommendations. Maybe before that, I was wondering if there are some questions either on the report itself, and I can try to respond, but maybe also to Christoph Spendley on the process itself, and probably on the next steps, at least as it could be seen from the intergovernmental process. So I maybe leave the floor here to see if other colleagues would like to say something or ask questions either to me or my colleagues or to Christoph. I don't see any hands and don't see any question on the chat. It's a bit long document, so I hope it was not too difficult to follow. I got probably the presentation could help to follow at least the recommendations that were part of the process. But I hope it was not too long to follow. So I don't see any question or reaction. If it's not the case, maybe Christophe, you would like to say a few words on the process itself and how you, as the co-author, as Switzerland co-author of the report, you consider how the report was received by the different stakeholders and by the states, and how you see maybe the next steps. That could be my first question.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Perhaps first to introduce myself, as perhaps not everyone know, I'm here in the Department of Foreign Affairs in the Central in Bern. I am deputy head of the section of human rights. That means I'm only a really, really little part of the game, and I was one of those colleagues being in the central working and contribute the work of the missions in Geneva and in New York. Perhaps I may repeat, and it was excellent, as Lucy and you, Patrick, has summarized the processes and also the content. The whole process was guided by the concept of inclusivity, and the co-facilitators guaranteed inclusivity in two levels. First, by ensuring the involvement of all relevant actors throughout the process, and second, by really reflecting all positions expressed in the written contribution from the member states, also from the NGOs. It was really the concept of transparency was a fundamental parameter of our work, and it guided our work. And it seems to me important to say it was just a little bit surprising to see really the common interest, the consensus of everyone to take the various proposals, make this process further. I had the idea there was really a lot of consensus in this whole process. Of course, we had a lot of discussions. As you remember, Patrick, there has been opposite elements during the discussions, but I think we have such a solid base now concerned about how should I say, on the base of the General Assembly Resolution 268. We have now the results of the report of the co-facilitators. I think this is really a solid, appropriate framework. We can go further. It's clear there's a lot of things we have to discuss. There are remaining challenges and gaps in the implementation of 268, and there's a need for adjustment to evolving situations. For me, the follow-up process, the concrete steps in the follow-up process are still a little bit open. For us, it was important not to reopen the resolution 268, but to go further in the discussions with all stakeholders and to have now some really concrete recommendations. We can build the discussion on it. Example is for me the budgetary process. That would be a very important element. Also the case management concerning the individual communications. It seems to me also a lot of pressure in the treaty bodies here themselves. And I think for the moment, we are still a little bit in uncertainty. For us, it's clear there must be a follow-up, but how concrete it will be built, that's for me, it's still open. Now we have, for the first time in the third commission of General Assembly, the resolution on treaty body work on the construction. This year it has been a technical rollover in this resolution, but now for the first time we had managed to introduce the report, taking note of the report of the co-facilitators. We have here now the first reference of this report. It has been linked into an official document of the UN. That is for me also a signal, a very important first step that we have now opened the process, the follow-up. Perhaps this for the moment.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for the additional explanation and context on the process. I think that's one of the maybe the concern of the fear that we have in Geneva, at least some of us, is that now we have such a good report, how we can make sure that it's not lost in the UN bureaucracy, and it's really taken into consideration by those who would like to keep this momentum on. And I think there is a clear need to have leaders in them from the states, you know, those who are supporting the work of treaty bodies, to have leaders that can push forward and be engaged not only at the General Assembly level, but also push the treaty bodies themselves, the members themselves, to continue the efforts to develop a better harmonization of their work. So I think it's crucial, and we rely on all those states who are actually supporting the work of the treaty bodies. And I guess as Switzerland, now that you are not part of the report itself, you can be again very vocal on this support, and we rely on those states to actually make sure there's some positive change happening from these reports. Is there any question or from colleagues? I know it's not easy to take the floor or to write on the chat in this kind of online discussions, and don't be afraid just to raise your question or your concern, or if something is not clear. You can even use the chat without mentioning to everyone. So just writing to me if you prefer. I think there is one. Is there? I don't see some hands.
Hi, it's Bethany.
Yes.
I actually do have.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm from International Disability Alliance. I'm the Human Rights Advisor here in New York, and I was wondering from Christoph's presentation, what UN document has recognized this report? Because it would be useful to know who's recognized it so far.
Thank you for your question, Christoph. Do you want to clarify what was exactly the UN document you referred to?
Yes, of course. This was the resolution of the third commission now, working just now for the moment in the preparation of the General Assembly. It was this technical resolution on the human rights treaty bodies. It's a technical resolution. It has been discussed only to make a technical rollover. It has been not the idea to open some substantive elements in this resolution, but we thought it would be sensible, it would be adequate to make a reference to the processes of the co-facilitation, and especially to take note, perhaps with appreciation or not with appreciation, but to take note formally from the report of the co-facilitators. And now we have made that, and I think it's very important that we have now the first reference. We have now the first UN document. We have say yes, even there may be some difference in the substance of the report of the co-facilitators, because not every member state agreed with all recommendations. That was clear, as it has been said. But that we have now a consensus among the stakeholders that we work further on the resolution 268 and on the basis and the recommendations of the report of the co-facilitators. I think this is now here first time in a document. That's it.
Yes, please, Kristen. Thank you very much, Christoph, for the explanation. And Kristen, I heard you would like to take the floor.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And thank you, Christoph, for being here. And also thanks for Switzerland's really strong position on the process and on raising issues that you flagged as particularly important to have on the table, like the budgetary needs of the treaty bodies and the case management system in particular. My question was just, what steps do you think can happen now in the interim period before we see the process, the formal discussions start up again? Do you see there as being any space for improvements to the treaty body system? In particular, do you think that we can move on things like the case management system and on resources for the treaty body system separately from this intergovernmental review? Thanks very much.
Christoph, you want to react, please?
Yes, excuse me. Oh, well, okay. Now, yes, the format of the follow-up process, for me, it's at the moment not really clear. It's clear that we have made this recommendation to the PGA, and that means also we have to wait now of the formal answer of the PGA and about the consensus in the General Assembly. But I think now it's a momentum, especially for the NGOs, because one key element in the one key result of this process was that everyone, all the stakeholders have to do their work. And I think it's also a legitimation, it's a reference, especially for the NGOs, to go further now in their activities, to take action, to take some points. They are important. Let's talk about the individual communications or some discussions about the reporting system as it itself. I think that is now, how should I say, the legitimate base for conferences, for pressure, and also to contributions to the other stakeholders. One element is also the questions about the contribution of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. We also have a certain expectation. We think that there should be also now comes a lot of actions from the office. As a member state, of course, I can't say we make it now some of our own engagement only. We need also partners. For the moment, I think especially the NGOs has a comfortable situation. They can really pick now the elements. They think now we have here something to say, we have here something to contribute substantively, and we can go further on that. And I think especially for the next year, I don't know how the situation will be now, of course, with COVID and so far, but there should be, for example, potential for conferences, for bigger events concerning some specific issues, so, specific topics on the base of the recommendations of this report. But what's the format concrete? It's also for me a little black box, you know. It's also, I can only agree, yes, Switzerland will still be here stand by, and we will have this on the screen. That's clear. We have made a lot of work in the meantime, and now it's not just over and that's it. Of course, but it's the format and the way we will go further is for me still a little bit open.
Thank you very much, Christoph. And I think indeed that we may also, as civil society, see how we can engage with some friendly state to move forward on again, to pick up some of the key recommendations and make sure that something happens from this report. So I think there is also probably a need to work between NGOs, some states, and other supporters, including some treaty bodies members, to make sure something can actually take place in the coming months. Is there any other question? I don't see anyone, but I'm not sure I can. Feel free to raise your hand or just start speaking or write on the chat. It's not I don't think it's the case. Then if you agree, we can maybe move to the next part. And actually, we already start to discuss a bit what could be the next steps of this process. But maybe Vincent, you would like to flag us some of the next key milestone and momentum we may see in the near future, and see also how we as civil society and we work since very long between ISHR, Amnesty, OSGI, and other colleagues with TBNet on this. And yeah, it would be great to see if we can continue to work together and how we can actually involve our colleagues from the different regions and those who are actually participating in this process, and also those who actually supported the position paper we prepared a few months ago, and that could be seen as a kind of possible next step. So Vincent, thank you again for taking this slot, and the floor is for you.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'm sorry, I'm appearing a little bit as an orange person. I'm doing all efforts to sort the lightning in my room, but quite clearly that doesn't work quite well. I feel like a witness under interrogation right now. I've had to put out a light in front of my face, so I really apologize for this poor video. Thanks a lot to colleagues from the TBNet Coalition, especially CCPR Center and also from OSGI for making this initiative possible. So I've been asked to speak a little bit about the next steps, but indeed, as you just said, Patrick, we've already started to discuss about next steps. I thought that a good introduction to a discussion on next steps would be to start about this very fundamental question. Well, what's in it for me? What's in the 2020 review process and follow-up for me as an activist, as an organization, as an NGO that engages with the treaty bodies, makes use of the treaty bodies, presumably is convinced about the relevance, the importance, and the sort of outcomes that we can obtain as NGOs through engaging with the treaty bodies. What's in it for me? What's in the review process? And perhaps a simple, if not answer, a simple hint to that is all those of us who are engaged with the treaty bodies at times face our own challenges, our own difficulties in engaging with the treaty bodies, just as we do in our daily advocacy, perhaps with other international or regional human rights mechanisms. And I think it's important to recall that this strengthening process which indeed has been going on for a long time. There's a lot of fatigue. There's also high levels of technicalities. It's a very technical, bureaucratic process. It's difficult to see the beginning of where the process begins, where it ends. But I think it's important perhaps to put a bit of a positive spin to it, to see that the strengthening process actually provides a very rare and welcome avenue for users of the system to make change happen. You know, I'm very fond of that quote of Gandhi: "Be the change that you want to see in the world." I think that very much applies here to the treaty body system. Many of the things that we want to be happening in the treaty bodies are things that we can contribute to make happening. I mean, of course, there's some bigger pictures issues where our ability to change the picture is very limited. You know, obviously things like funding to the system or others. But I think it's important to recall that as part of the strengthening process in previous years, some of the organizations around us today have contributed to formidable developments, have engaged, worked with the treaty bodies, and enacted positive changes to the system as part of the strengthening system. Things like the development of follow-up processes and monitoring of implementation by states parties. Engagement with civil society has tremendously evolved and improved in recent years, which is obviously thanks to the work of many of you and organizations like TBNet. And I think it's fair to recall that the strengthening process is pretty unique, including in comparison to other international human rights bodies, in that it does provide an avenue, despite its technicalities, despite the challenges around it, despite the heaviness around the whole process. It provides relevant avenues for us, for NGOs, for you as NGOs to make suggestions and to contribute to improve the work of the treaty bodies. So I have a few points in terms of the next steps, and thanks again for previous speakers who have already touched upon the next steps in the process. I think a good starting point is when we think about next steps. What have we achieved so far? And there's different ways to look at what we have achieved. Colleagues, and especially Lucy, have made a very useful and thorough a review of what the process has been so far. I think that for some of us, or perhaps many of us, there were high expectations, of course, that the process was going to address some of the very fundamental questions, some of which have been on the table for decades. I mean, you read the reports from Philip Alston from the 1990s about the treaty body system. Some of his questions, some of the challenges that he had flagged in the previous century remain unaddressed to this day. So there's obviously expectations in terms of the extent to which that process can deliver upon expectations. But I think another way to look at it is to see the very positive developments that have occurred so far. And previous speakers, including Patrick, have spoken to very interesting developments, and Lucy and Christophe as well. When we see the very high level of interest from treaty body members, states, NGOs about the need for a fixed and predictable review cycle, that's new. That's quite new, and that's moving forward. And that's a very positive development that was made possible as part of the current strengthening process. And there's very interesting developments in that regard. Another question which I think is important in terms of looking at the next steps is, what do we want to achieve? What do we NGOs, what do we want? Do we want a new intergovernmental process at the UN General Assembly? Do we want to avoid that? Do we want the treaty bodies to take action upon the recommendations, the very interesting recommendations that have been compiled by Switzerland and Morocco following their consultative process? What exactly do we want at the end of the day? I think many of us are a little bit, and there's this very shared feeling that there's we're not very clear as to what's happening next. And in fact, it's a situation where everyone's looking at each other and saying, states are looking at the treaty bodies and saying, well, the change will come from you. And the treaty bodies are looking at OHCHR saying, well, the change needs to come from you. So there's a bit of there's not necessarily a high level of clarity as to who's going to do what or who's supposed to be doing what. for the follow-up process, which I think is also provides an opportunity for us as advocates, as organizations engaging with the treaty bodies, to actually make use of the situation and make proposals and work with relevant actors to, as part of the next steps in the process. So I'd like to focus on the role of some of the key actors in terms of the next steps. One of the questions I was going to address was the status of the co-facilitators report, and I think Christophe has answered that question. It was not, one concern had been that this co-facilitators report was not really an UNGA document. It was not an official UN document, but Christophe has very helpfully clarified that now it is considered a GA, or it has been recognized in a GA resolution. Which is very important, of course, because that gives a strong basis, a strong status for the co-facilitators report. I think an important task in terms of the next steps is to identify what are the most pressing issues for anyone, states, NGOs, treaty body members, OHCHR, who are part of the process. I think it's important to see what's really, we can't avoid the pressing question of the implications of COVID, which has prevented a number of activities by the treaty bodies, but that will be the subject of a separate panel. So very briefly, a few comments, and then I'd really love to hear from you and get a chance to exchange with you, but a few comments on the role of different actors. I think a lot of eyes have been geared on the President of the General Assembly. You will recall that the previous was initiated, the review process, the appointment of the co-facilitators was undertaken by the previous President of the General Assembly, and there was a change a few weeks ago with the new Turkish President of the General Assembly taking office. There was apparently a handover of the co-facilitators report by the previous PGA to the new President of the General Assembly, but there's expectations about what the new President of the General Assembly will do with that report. And I think so far it's fair to say that it's not been entirely clear. I speak under the control of colleagues in New York or other colleagues who may have more updated information, but so far there hasn't been much clarity in terms of what the intentions of the current President of the General Assembly is in terms of taking the process forward and taking action based on the co-facilitators report. Another key question, of course, this has been flagged by previous speakers, is about the role of states. Well, what are the intentions of states? There's been pretty high interest of states in the process. I mean, look at the amount of contributions that were made by states to the process. States have been engaging in the process, and there were various diverging views among states. And of course, the General Assembly is an agglomerate of states. So the intention of states and what states intend to do as part of follow-up is really important. Although I think it's also fair to say that for a number of states, there's this really expectation to hear from us, to hear from NGOs, to hear from treaty body members about, what are our suggestions? What do we recommend? What do we suggest in terms of the next steps and the follow-up? In that regard, I will emphasize once again the fact that I think a very interesting and positive element of the co-facilitators report is the call for a follow-up process. So the co-facilitators report is not an end in itself. It suggests and it calls for a proper follow-up process, which could, without necessarily entering into details, the follow-up, it's not clear whether the follow-up process should be a GA-led process. Perhaps there is an anticipation or an expectation from some actors that it should be a GA-led process, but perhaps it doesn't have to be a GA-led process. We could think very openly, perhaps it could be a treaty body-led process, given that the recommendations are, of course, addressed for a number of them to the treaty bodies. That leads me to the next point on the role of treaty body members and chairs. Quite clearly, a number, not all, but a number of recommendations in the co-facilitators reports are directly addressed to the treaty bodies, and there's expectations that the treaty bodies will take ownership for those recommendations. There's obviously been questions raised, and there can be questions raised about the capacity and the willingness of treaty body members and chairs to take responsibility and to act on the recommendations that are addressed to them in this report. And of course, there's the capacity issue is crucial. Many of the recommendations do require resources, and we all know that resources are always scarce and too scarce for the treaty bodies. But I think we also have a number of examples that when there's a will, there's a way, and there's a lot that the treaty body members, the treaty body chairs themselves can do within their parameters, within the limits of their mandates. Another key actor is ourselves, NGOs, and I think it's important to recall that NGOs have played crucial roles as part of strengthening processes. And when we think of follow-up, well, now is the time for us to think, well, if there's not so much clarity as to what's going to happen, let's be proactive. Let's think outside of the box. Let's see what we can propose, what kind of advocacy we can undertake with treaty bodies, with treaty body members, with OHCHR, with states, and make proposals in terms of, well, what do we see as the most pressing issues in the co-facilitators report, and how can we make change happen? If there's recommendations in that report that matter to us, how can we translate those recommendations into reality? We all know, and that applies very much, but not only to colleagues at TBNet, of course, we have a very special relationship with the treaty bodies. We all know that much change can come from the treaty bodies without having to go to states. And we all know that the moment the treaty bodies go to states, it becomes a very politicized process, very long and drawn process. And the outcome is very uncertain because, of course, states, number of states, this has been evidenced in the most recent process, a number of states take any and all opportunities to curtail rather than promote the effectiveness of the treaty bodies. So I think, in a number of the issues that are touched upon by the report, I will not go through the details of the report, and Patrick has very helpfully broken down the various aspects of the report. But I think a number of issues that are addressed in the report, NGOs, we can play a very important role in terms of the next steps and the follow-up. And finally, two very important actors, OHCHR and the High Commissioner. I've noted at least 5 references to the role of the OHCHR in the co-facilitators report, which I think is very interesting. Quite clearly, the co-facilitators are acknowledging that the OHCHR can play a very important role, perhaps a more central role in terms of the recommendations in their report, in terms of things like harmonizing working methods, etc. The OHCHR being the secretariat of all the treaty bodies, there's an acknowledgement that they can play a very important role. And I think it's also fair to acknowledge and recognize that unlike several of her predecessors, the High Commissioner has taken a very limited and background role in the current strengthening process by making very limited and targeted interventions when previous High Commissioners like Navi Pillay or others had taken a much more prominent role in the strengthening process. I think I'll stop here and very happy to take comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Vincent, for your presentation of the key ideas you flag on this next steps for the process. And I think you really underline how all the different stakeholders may work together and how we as civil society, we should actually have a specific role on pushing for the implementation of those recommendations from the reports. I think what would be also very interesting is to hear from the colleagues from the different regions participating in this webinar and those who will participate tomorrow. What would you expect from NGOs from Geneva or in New York in terms of keeping this momentum, and how you would like to be involved in the next step of the process? I know it's extremely difficult in the current context where no one can really travel, and we spend basically our time on online webinars like this one. But I think our role as TBNet and the colleagues organizing those webinars is to make sure you can be involved and at least be aware of the process. So I think it would be very interesting to hear also from you, based on the suggestions from Vincent, what you would envisage or what you would expect or what you would need from our side, on how we can better involve you in that process the coming months and for next year. So I think yeah, I would be very pleased to maybe to hear from the different colleagues from the participating in this webinar, and also maybe to hear if there is some, I don't know, some red line or some of the recommendations mentioned in this report that you really, with which one you would really disagree, or where we should be very careful in terms of the implication or impact for the work of the NGOs at the national level. So because from Geneva, it's, I mean, all those recommendations sounds fairly good, and I think we could support all of them, at least most of them, from the reports. But I think it would be also very interesting to hear from you in the operating at the national level, something we might not be aware of, and we should be careful in terms of the content of the reports. So feel free to speak. I think it's very important that we keep your views and your feedback on board for the next steps. Yeah. Yes, Sharon, maybe you would like to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks to ISHR and TBNet and our colleagues who have just kept those of us working in region and on in a national context, because indeed we were involved in the process in the beginning, and then hearing it all recap was very helpful. Both yikes and okay, there has been some process. I wanted to and to thank our colleagues from the mission, from the Swiss mission. Thank you for being available and being a resource. I wanted to pick up on what Vincent was saying about the way we might think about going forward in terms of the actors, and I really like the questions, like, you know, not forgetting what we've achieved, but also what do we want to achieve. So I wanted to take it at, perhaps we might think about from the context of your question and taking up your question and invitation, what do we need from you and from us to collectively? One is, when we think about the work at a national level, in the context of China, we actually have two levels that are really complex and quite problematic right now. So the national level is Beijing, and then the local level, we can think local as Hong Kong. And there will be upcoming reviews, which are absolutely critical. So in terms of thinking about national context, and we, and I myself personally, have been trapped in New York for the whole last year, and I haven't been able to go back to region because of travel, is now I'm trapped in two places nationally, which are in really bad shape. You know, so tomorrow will be, we may not know the outcome tomorrow or for some time to come because of the legal challenges being mounted, and we may not know for many reasons. But I do think that the outcome of this election will have some impact on the engagement with the UN structurally, and also will have, you know, impacts on those of us working in the region. So I'm wondering, are there ways we can think about going forward how we can walk and chew gum? That is, how do we continue to address together the structural follow-up suggestions at the high level, kind of the structural questions, but then how do we not lose, or how do we build the engagement with local civil society? So I can share one of the challenges. One of the challenges is we have issued a white paper where we try to center the whole international framework and saying, in this terrible situation, we are not using the main normative advocacy tool we have. And like the ICCPR is coming up for review. Now, we've gotten a lot of reactions, and I share that to think about the challenge of how we might go forward. And the reactions are really disheartening from not only local activists who say that can't make a difference. It's not going to help us. And then the second level is from experts, from legal and country experts who actually dismiss the UN human rights system and that it doesn't work. So I think the challenge is, while we work together on the structural process, supporting the strength, expanding the strength and effectiveness of all the actors in particular the treaty bodies, we're also, you have to recognize that we need to figure out a way to have to work that doesn't lose the buy-in and the trust, and that something can be done at the local level. And so, you know, is there a way to take the recommendations that do not require any kind of more formal, structural decisions? So, I don't know what's going on here. Hello?
Yes, please.
I don't know why, but I'm all plugged in and it says I'm running out of battery. This is how civil society feels on the ground. We're running out of juice. So the question on Walk and Chew Gum is there a way that the treaty bodies, you know, they can be treaty body led? So are there pieces of recommendations that we can, you know, more granular take out and see if we can just do it, but in the context of a specific review or in preparation for specific reviews coming up? And I think that way it's both concrete and it also is like a proof of concept. It's like we can show that it works or that it's useful. So I think that's what I mean by Walk and Chew Gum, that we both address the needs of us on the ground, because it doesn't help us, because those of us who have been involved, and you're the experts and you're saying it's technical and difficult to follow. How do we expect civil society engagement who actually are the people on the ground, who, you know, our networks, who have information, who are being arrested, who are being, you know, all of their ICCPR rights, the economic ICERD is coming up also for our region. So there are, and then we could look ahead that the rights of the child. So in very specific substantive treaty context, these reviews are coming up. Are there ways we can just take the treaty body led and try some of that? And some of it, what is it that civil society, can we just take a lead and just do it? Be very French, don't ask for permission, do it. You know, we can just do it and then figure out, does it work? And then we can show some proof of concept experience in 2021 and 2022. Is there a way we can do that? So that was my long way to say, help. And we need to think about how to think about that, you know, not losing buy-in from civil society networks that we work with, because it doesn't help us to say you have a great structural review and they're all going, we don't want to participate anymore, because it doesn't look useful. Right? It doesn't look useful. So we've been doing training and we're going to be trying to do more training. Whenever we raise treaty body process in our trainings, we get like, oh my God, why should we participate? It seems so complicated. Yeah. So we need help on those different issues. And that's my initial list of help. Vincent, since you opened up the question.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for your questions and your kind of request for support. And yeah, Vincent, would you like to respond or to react? I think there's so many valid questions.
I mean, if very briefly, thanks, Sharon. 3 points. One, I can only very much concur and embrace the comment on the need to mobilize ownership at the local level, at the national level. That's crucial, that's critical. We've tried to do that with an initiative of op-eds from national actors jointly with Open Global Rights in preparation for the 2020 review. But interestingly, the majority of inputs and proposals that were received were from actors that do engage with the treaty bodies, you know, in Geneva and New York. Our willingness was very much to give priority to national actors, but that's a key challenge. But I can only concur that despite the size of the challenge, we need to enhance ownership from national actors in that process. That's crucial. The second point, I don't think I've been very concrete in terms of next steps to share with you all that we understand that a number of actors are willing to move towards a new intergovernmental process on treaty body strengthening at the GA. I think that's clearly the willingness by the OHCHR, certainly by a few states. I'm less sure about treaty body members and NGOs, because I think a number of us and treaty body members see a lot of risks in the new intergovernmental process, but there's also a desirability that the outcomes of the 2020 review would need to be enshrined somehow, and they need to be enshrined and strengthened as part of a GA-led process. I think there's this expectation from a number of actors. And the last point, Sharon, you raised in your comment, things that can be, you said do it, the things that we can do now, the things that the treaty bodies can do now. Very good point. I think there's a number of them. When I think about the case management platform for individual communications, that can happen without a GA resolution, although the GA needs to fund it or someone needs to fund it. The issue of funding can also be sorted by state, not necessarily without having to go through a GA resolution, although a GA resolution could help. Although it could make things worse as well. The issue of nominations of members doesn't necessarily require a new GA resolution, nominations of candidates to the treaty bodies. The issue of going digital, the issue of harmonization can be dealt by the treaty bodies themselves without a resolution. It doesn't require a resolution for the treaty bodies to sort the issue of harmonization. So I think that's a crucial point.